after writing the book, thinking about the power of questions, that moment came back into my mind thinking, wow, we really are all one question away from a completely different life. That's where you can start asking better questions and surfacing better insight, better data, and then you start becoming more and more clear on the path. That's where you make good decisions from. So for me, what happened is I emailed a mentor of mine and I explained the situation and just asked for some feedback. He's on the front of the book, Chip Conley, and he was the one that responded back and just said, what do you want for your life?
Hey there, I'm Sagar Soni. If you are a chronic overthinker, a wannabe productivity expert, and is having a hard time understanding how to squeeze productivity out of every waking minute, but also learn how to take a chill pill, then you are in the right place. Let's learn from successful people, YouTubers, book authors, podcasters, and every other stranger that I can get my hands on. Well, figuratively, let's learn how they balance their life. Welcome to Beyond the Speech. Author of the book, Personal Socrates, Marc Champagne. Thank you very much for joining me on this podcast.
Oh, the honor and the pleasure is mine. I can't wait to dive into a great chat with you.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm excited for this conversation. I read your book, and let's just start with this. After building your journaling app that had almost 87 million users, how can you still be in the messy middle? I know in the book you talk about messy middle being where you recommend and suggest that ask yourself that do you want to keep going or do you want to stop? From outside looking in, someone with an 87 million user app, you have reached an incredible feat. So how can you decide that you want to delete the app? What got you there? What was going on in your head? Let's just start there.
Sure, that's a big question and a great place to start. I mean, I thought life was becoming too boring, so I thought, hey, let's just shake it up and make things really interesting. No, I'm just kidding, of course. But I mean, the reality of this situation is we kind of had no choice but to shut down that app or pivot the business, I guess you can say, because in a way. I'm still very much in the space of mental fitness. It's just the products and services that I'm offering, at least on my side now, look a little bit different. Because the backstory of the app is even though we reached that number of people, we had challenges with the business model for, unfortunately, very well-known startup challenges or reasons that I think a lot of tech companies or app developers and so forth go through. I mean, just classic user flows and users not converting and trying to figure out what the best and the most simple experience into the product would be and so forth. Because, we created the app to solve a challenge that I had, which we did and solved that. And because, at least I was very involved in the day-to-day, I knew exactly how to use the app, where to go and how it worked and so forth. And eventually once we conducted proper, I would say professional user research, that's when it became really clear that we had a lot more work to do to simplify the process. And we were starting to get user feedback and so forth, which was really, it was almost really too bad because it was so clear what we had to do next, but we waited too long to do that research where we actually couldn't afford to go through multiple rounds of development iterations. And that's the part, like by that time in the journey, we weren't naive enough to say, oh yeah, we'll just nail it in the next iteration based on all this feedback. We knew that it would take multiple rounds of development, and all of that had, pretty significant costs associated to it. So we had to shut it down. And that's where it becomes really interesting because in a way, there's a validation of the concept and the appetite to have a practice like journaling and have questions guide people through challenging situations and help, find clarity in how we show up and operate in our daily lives. That was pretty clear. It's just the way that we had it set up. Unfortunately, wasn't able to deliver on like a long-term solution, and had to pivot a few times afterwards. And one of those pivots was, I don't think if we hadn't deleted the app, I don't think the idea of the book would have ever surfaced. I guess I can't say that for certain, but that came out of that messy middle period where things felt really challenging and had to really do, follow my own practices and ask some pretty big questions. And the book is kind of like an analog mini version of what the app was in a way.
I see. See, I get it. You were in the journaling mental fitness space, and that led you to building this app, and you had your hurdles, which you tried to pivot from that. I understand that. The app was basically there for bettering yourself mentally. I get that. But how did you get into this space to begin with? What was the path, the trajectory that led you to this path, because that path led to your mental fitness program that you currently run, and you are a public speaker now too. So what was that journey like?
Yeah, well, that journey was just basically, I was and continue to be someone that uses these practices day in and day out. The difference was I was in a corporate job in the healthcare space for about a decade, where I was in sales and analytics and forecasting, and then the tail end of that career was in product and brand management. But throughout that entire decade, I had a journaling practice, and I was traveling quite a bit. So at one point, I shifted from purely journaling from an analytical or an analog standpoint with pen and paper to using digital tools. But I say digital tools, back in those times, like an advanced digital tool would have been Apple Notes kind of thing, and just pure typing, like not what we know
What year
of
are we
it
talking
today.
about?
This is this is 10 years ago at this point.
Okay.
When I was in that career. So, and even before that, it was before Apple Notes. I remember the first time I ever journaled digitally was, I think I was using Microsoft Word, just like a regular word processor. And I'd start the day, and I still have those files saved as a PDF export. So, the point being though, I was trying to transition personally to a digital format because I didn't want to carry around a bunch of notebooks when traveling, and the practice was for me that important that I still wanted to keep it up even when I wasn't at home and so forth. So that frustration was there, and the other frustration was not many people knew at that time of the practice of journaling from the perspective that I was learning about it. When I would study someone or read their biography or read that time, I think it was Success Magazine and blog posts and so forth, everyone that was being featured or talked about, they were all sharing questions that they had asked themselves along their personal and professional journey. And all I was doing was capturing the questions that I was seeing being profiled, and then I would write about those based on where I was at in my life. So that's where it really started to shift, because at that point I remember I'm like, okay, I'm journaling digitally. It works. The best people in the world use this practice. They don't really talk about it too much, or they don't talk about it explicitly. They kind of skirt around the idea a little bit, but they're doing it. And also the meditation apps were just starting to take off from a mainstream perspective, Calm and Headspace. So I remember thinking, okay, people are open to being guided digitally, at least in the meditation space. But there was nothing that existed in the journaling space at that time. And that's when I flipped my brother-in-law an email, actually, Sinay Shah, and because he was in IT, and which we joked he's still in that industry. Like, that is not development by any means, but he was the closest person that I knew to having any kind of experience in technology, and has been a lifelong entrepreneur. And we partnered up and created the app.
I see. Okay, so you were always into journaling. It just happened to be that you did not like the means that were presented at the time, 2015 or 20, and going forward. So you decided to start your own. That's all.
Yeah, exactly.
I see. We all want to ask the right questions. You are all about asking that you are one question away from bettering your life. What was that question for you?
Well, so right when I shut down the app, as you can imagine, the emotions were running pretty high at that point, and it was really around the only time in my life where I felt hopeless, because I knew that this was the work that I'm meant to be doing, but now I just deleted the path essentially, and I didn't want to go back to my past life or past career because it just didn't feel aligned anymore. So for me, what happened is I emailed a mentor of mine and I explained the situation and just asked for some feedback. And he's on, since you have the book, he's on the front of the book, Chip Conley, and he was the one that responded back and just said, "What do you want for your life?" And that's when I realized, because it was coming from him, because it was so well timed in a place in my life where, like I said, I had lost hope and really had no direction. That question had enough power to pause all of the other looping thoughts that were leading me down a deep depression. And just for a few seconds think, okay, well, if this is what I want, then who do I need to speak to? Or what's one thing I can do today to get closer to realizing, that desire? And that's also when after writing the book, thinking about the power of questions, that moment came back into my mind, thinking, wow, we really are all one question away from a completely different life. Because without that question, I'm not sure where my path would have led. It was definitely not going in a really great direction. And that's the power of a question like that. But it has to be well timed, right? Because I could ask that question to myself right now, and it serves as a good check-in, but it doesn't have the same power as it did, when I was in that situation. So that's just. But the nice thing about when we train our minds to ask good quality questions is we end up surfacing the right prompts, or the right people start to come by. Like, for whatever reason, there was an intuitive, I didn't know Chip that well other than interviewing a couple times, but something intuitively was saying, just ask him for some advice.
Yeah, see, I get that, because when I read that part on the book, I was wondering the same thing, that this question, it has to be timed, because it depends on what season you are in your life, because that
Exactly.
question is not going to resonate with everybody, doesn't matter what age they are. So then
Yeah.
how do we distinguish between the noise and the questions that truly have the power to shift our lives in a completely new direction?
Well, I think that's what's most important is what surrounds your internal and external environment when you ask these questions, right? Because if you ask surface level questions and you're just kind of busy and you're in between a meeting or something like that, and you're just trying to get some knowledge, you'll get surface level answers in a situation like that. But if you take some time, I mean, and not everyone's a morning person, so find the time. I guess the question would be, when is your mind most still or most quiet? And pick that time and check in with yourself. Some questions that are just kind of universal in terms of quality and timing are questions like, what am I pretending not to know right now in this moment? Because that's usually, or another way to reframe that is, what am I hearing in the whispers? Because that's where you get a
Okay.
lot of insight, right? All of a sudden you start thinking about relationships or things that are going on in your life that are there. They're kind of in like the back corner of the room, but you're consciously choosing not to deal with those things because for various reasons, or a whole host of reasons. But those are the things that, when your mind is still enough, you can start surfacing data, because that's all it is. To me, it's and I think it's helpful too if you can think about asking these questions and checking in with yourself from the place of, we're just surfacing data about what's going on in our lives. No different than what we do in the business world on a project or a service. Like, you make decisions based on information that you have, but we don't get that information from ourselves often, and then get to this point where we're forced to make some decisions because we can no longer ignore what's happening.
Hey, quick pause. If you're enjoying this episode and getting value out of these conversations, I have a small favor to ask from you. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anywhere else, I would greatly appreciate if you leave a 5-star review. It's going to help more people discover this show. And if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to my channel and drop a comment with your thoughts. I would love to hear your take as well. So let's keep these conversations going. All right, back to the episode. Yeah, I was wondering about this because before this before you just saying that right now. What I was thinking that to ask better quality, more important questions, it has to be connected to what you really value and what your purpose in life. But asking what's your purpose in life, that's a very, very vague and crazy broad question. That's not how you come to your true path that you really belong to be in. That's why I feel like what you just said, I think that makes sense more, that you already know deep down that you have an intuition that you are constantly thinking about this, but you are choosing to distract yourself to not sit still and then get into it
Yeah.
and answer that question. What is bugging you right now? So I feel like more than values and purpose, this is what we should be really asking ourselves. That's where true, better quality questions might come out.
Well, and even to use the example you just provided, what is my purpose in life? I mean, a way you can reframe that into, and again, making sure that you're in a quiet frame of mind. The way you can get at a real answer to that is where am I naturally being guided to? That will lead you to a purpose related areas. It may take a little bit longer because then you might not get the download all in one shot, but you can see like, okay, because then that leads to the next question. So where am I naturally being guided? Like, what does that actually mean? Who's showing up in my life? Where do I feel most alive, as an example, are other questions that then come from going down that chain of thought, right?
Hmm.
And for me, like the way that would show up is like, okay, well, every time I'm interviewing someone or able to unpack information around mental fitness, I feel really alive. Like being able to do things like this, for me, it naturally, coming off an interview like this, I feel great, right?
Hmm.
So just paying attention to that, right? And you can look at your calendar and see what you did in the week, and okay, what gave me energy versus took away energy, and you slowly start capturing kind of the breadcrumbs of life, and all of these little hints around. Oh, okay, so this is where I feel at my greatest, where I feel most alive, and so forth. But we get kind of hung up around, like, we have to figure it all out overnight and then make
Hmm.
massive life changes or career changes,
Yeah.
and that just is a recipe to be unhappy, because it often fails because we're trying to force it, right? So we have to be
Yeah.
patient.
Yeah, I would see there's two parts to this, because you said, how you need to, this I think involves a lot of trial and error, because you want to
Yeah.
see what your calendar looks like, what gives you energy, what drains your energy. That should be the first step, because once you clear that area out, maybe that might reveal the question on itself, instead of you trying to come up with a question of what truly matters to you. So just clearing that clutter would open up much, it would just make everything super still, and that will allow the true authentic self to come out.
Correct. And this is the magic. You have to continue doing that. So this is where consistent journaling practice, and just for everyone listening, should, if you're not journaling, just so it's not this like scary practice, journaling is just reflection. So whether you're doing that pen to paper or using an app or taking a walk, reflection is just thought, right? Like, so we're just talking about questions to help guide some reflection and thought. So what's most important to me, though, is the constant checking in with ourselves to reflect on some of these questions, because then that's when you start really unpacking all these little insights, and they just start to naturally surface. And over time, they form a whole story, right? That's where the
Okay,
power is.
I see you said, okay, because I was going to ask you about this, that does journaling, what you try to say in your personal definition of journaling, is that a tool for decision making or and reinvention, or is it a tool for mental clarity? But then I think what you are saying, that the first step is mental clarity, and then you
Yeah.
ask enough questions day in and day out, and maybe then you might be able to reinvent yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to be, and there's a step before that. I mean, well, we kind of talked about it. When you're to do to practice something like journaling when your mind is still, is kind of the first step, because the reality of the situation, based on, since I work with a lot of corporate teams in the mental fitness space, I see the data, and I have my own company data, but there's global data. The majority of the population, almost 60%, says they're stressed daily at work. So if that's the case, you can't possibly think that you're going to start surfacing really good insights or make really great decisions from a place of stress and survival thinking. So step one has to be, we need to do this. And it's not about being, in this thriving state all day, but having moments of that. And that's where the whole angle of mental fitness, whether it's doing some breathing or meditation or a walk outside, like finding the practices for you that put your mind in a good state. Because from there, that's where you can start asking better questions and surfacing better insight, better data. And then you start becoming more and more clear on the path, right? Because that's where you make good decisions from, not from a place of you're in a survival mode or a scarcity mindset. Like that's, and I was there. I mean, I've been in and out there myself. Like that's where you just start doing things reactively, and they're not in an alignment with who you're trying to become.
Yeah, because I tried that after reading your book. I realized that, okay, let me try this. I'll start journaling and I'll ask, what is my main question? But then when I sit down, I feel like, wait, that's not the best way to start getting into journaling. I need to first clear up and see what I currently have, and then see what I can bring out of that. And maybe that will showcase what my current values are, what my current purpose is. And then it might reveal that, okay, what is the main question that I'm trying to answer?
Sure. Yeah. Makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. In the book, I know there are three categories of question types. Can you talk a little bit about them? The three steps was getting clear, living intentionally, and expanding possibility.
Yeah. Well, we touched on it a little bit. I mean, most people want to skip right over to expanding possibility, right? Getting the breakthrough idea, all the big innovation, like just, living in abundance, like all the stuff that you hear about. But they skip all of that clarity piece that we talked about, right? Like it's really hard to do that when your mind is in this like fixed mindset. So I think of the person I think of most often on this topic is Naveen Jain, who's a well-known serial entrepreneur, a billionaire entrepreneur, actually, and he always comes to mind because when he's thinking about big challenges or trying to start companies that have the potential to impact 1 billion people, he makes sure that he asks questions that are in the frame of imagine if, or what if this was possible, and that immediately opens up a whole other level of thinking, right? You're not thinking from a place, because most people, what happens is, well, I can't do that. I don't have enough money, or I don't have enough time to be working on this thing on the side. Or if it's within a team, we're not going to get approval. We don't have enough of budget to get it done, and so forth. Like right away, we come up with all of the reasons why something will not work, which I'm not saying that all of that is not true. And this is what Naveen is trying to get across is, but at least start from a place of possibility. And it's almost like you're exercising your mind to think from that level. And it's surprising because a lot of times, a lot of those things then do come to fruition that were, a few minutes ago, they weren't even ideas. The whole project would have been shot. And that includes with our personal life as well. So I think, you have to put your mind in a thriving state before getting to these places of expanded possibility. And expanded possibility actually happens by default when you start doing the other two steps, right? And when you're clear. And this is what I mean, where it becomes, this is why it's these are practices, and it's fitness for the mind, because it does take some reps, take some time. It's not, you have a journaling practice or a breathwork practice, and then all of a sudden everything's clear to you. It's day by day, and it's being kind to ourselves. It's not judging ourselves. It's acknowledging the fact that when we come out of this interview setting, we get hit with all the opposite, right? Social media, fear-based news headlines, all of that stuff. So we have to set our minds up with practices that protect ourselves from that. Because again, if you're going to go into, trying to live this expanded life and come up with all these ideas and answers around like what you should be doing from that survival state, it's just not going to work, or it's going to be a real rough path.
Yeah. I know obviously you're a fan of journaling, but how do you rate journaling to other self-care things? For example, some people say forget everything else. Make sure you go through an hour of workout and it will outgain every other benefit that other self-care practices have, or meditation or deep breathing. Some people just completely are into that there is nothing better than this. What are your thoughts on that? Or do you
Yeah.
try some of everything?
Yeah, well, I try. I mean, just thankfully, due to the nature of my work, I get to I'm exposed to a lot of different practices and rituals, and I study these with including I'm working on the next book, and I'm studying Zen masters and yogis and samurai and
Wow.
indigenous elders, and understanding like what were their practices and rituals, and how can we leverage those in modern times with the struggles that we have. So I'm always looking for different ways that we can use these practices in our regular routines. What I would say though, for sure, for me personally, journaling is, I would say, the staple practice that I have,
Hmm.
along with physical exercise, and I would say a breathwork practice. That's the newest. I mean, when I say newest, probably the last 5 years, but it's the newest one that is has turned into a non-negotiable in my routine.
Hmm.
If let's say for some reason, I don't sleep well, and or I have to get up earlier than expected, or I have to fly somewhere, and I don't have the regular amount of time that I would normally do, go through my morning routine. The thing
Hmm.
that I will absolutely do is 2 or 3 minutes of guided breathing. So
Really?
that's kind of how this stuff has evolved. But I would say for everyone listening or watching, you know the things that work for you. Just start with answering the question, what are 3 to 5 practices or activities or rituals that when you do those things, your mind feels good? And just
Hmm.
start doing those more often. And it doesn't have to be all of them, right? Like, journaling, breath work, meditation, physical exercise, a cold plunge or a walk. I mean, all of that stuff, they're all helpful. And of course, if you do all of them, you'll probably feel pretty good. But the key is you have to find a personalized routine and
Hmm.
figure out what works. It's no different than physical exercise. If you don't like to run, it doesn't rule out all physical exercise, right?
Hmm.
There's a million different things you can do to move the body. So
Yeah.
same thing with the mind. Just find what works for you, and just treat it as an experiment, but do something.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's important to emphasize on this that don't try to do everything, because after
Yeah.
watching all these YouTube gurus and self-development influencers, I thought, oh wow, I should be doing all of this too. So let's start with a half an hour workout and then breathing exercises. Oh, I don't want to forget meditation. Oh, let me journal too. It's a recipe for disaster,
Yeah.
because not everybody enjoys everything and it's not sustainable. Maybe it is for some people who have 3 hours available for a morning routine, not for a normal 9 to 5er. So
Yeah.
just picks 1 or 2 items, maybe 3 items that you can squeeze before you start your regular day.
Yeah. Well, I try. This is, I mean, I do my best to preach this, that around simplicity and in integrating these practices into your existing routine, just because that was what works for me. So we've been talking a lot about just checking in with ourselves. When I say that, it doesn't have to be a 20-minute like morning pages free writing about checking in. It could be as simple as your first cup of coffee is brewing, or if your tea is steeping in the morning, your first cup of water. How do I feel today? One word. Okay. If I feel a bit tight or anxious, well, why? Like what's the fuel source behind that? And is it something that I can cut as a fuel source?
Hmm.
That takes seconds. And often even just acknowledging the fact that we're not feeling great, or equally as important, if we're feeling fantastic, acknowledge why and bottle that up, because you're going to get hit with something in the day. We just go up and down. That's just the normal part of life. So then you can go
Hmm.
back to that. And the key is that, or I think what's most important is, it doesn't, like, whether we ask that question or not, those emotions are rolling into the day with us and they affect everything, right? They
True.
affect how we show up for ourselves and others, and how we think, and whether we're focused or not, or distracted. So for me, it's just, it doesn't have to be long. Even if we stack everything I just talked about recently around a three minutes of breath work, a check-in practice, I mean, we're still under 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And your coffee's brewing. I challenge anyone to just figure out, like, take what you're doing early in the morning and see if you can tack on some of these little practices for a couple minutes, and then just do it for 5 days. Do it from Monday to Friday, and check in with yourself Friday afternoon and see how you've been feeling and what's different.
Yeah. You said that it takes a couple of minutes while your coffee is brewing and ask that question. I feel like that's the easy part. What's harder is to come up with the question that you want to ask yourself in your early morning check-in. Because I was going through this exercise just recently, and what I have come up with my morning mantra right now that I'm trying to dedicate the first 7, or maybe I'll do it for 10 days and I'll see how that goes, because it helps me with decision making for the day, is that I start the day now with saying, lead by example, lead by example, lead by example. Because we can talk all we want, but then if you don't do any of those actions that you are talking about, it means nothing. And that's where I am stuck, which is why that has become my morning question. That morning check in involves me reminding myself that none of this means anything if I don't lead by example. So
Yeah.
I feel like coming up with that is harder than actually doing it.
Well, for sure. But I mean, again, I think the theme that has been coming up in our conversation is prioritizing a couple minutes to think about it proactively. So, as an example for your situation or what you shared, the way I would look at that is before you jump into any reaction mode of emails or Slack or whatever it is, if your objective is to lead by example, just take a look, just open up your calendar and take a look at what's on deck for the day. And then the question to me would be, how will I lead by example today based on what's going on? What does that actually look like? And again, you
Absolutely.
don't have to write anything down. You can just look at this and be like, okay, for there, I'm just going to be, I'm going to be present. I'm going to be really present. I'm going to ask good questions because I'm listening and I'm not focusing on the next meeting or the things that I need to do or so forth, but just intentionally setting some of those intentions for the day, direct the entire day versus, again, or because the alternative is you just jump into the day and you just start, right? And then
Yeah,
now
absolutely.
you're not controlling that. Others and events and meetings and emails are controlling how you're showing up.
I was just when I was researching about your work, I see that you have a lot of clients that you work with, the customers that you work with. Your entire workspace is surrounding performance and mental clarity. What I wanted to know is that what's your take on toxic productivity? Because just before we started this conversation, we were talking about productivity and how people want to over optimize it, but then it leads to toxic productivity. What is your experience being like with that?
Yeah, productivity is an interesting one for me because it seems like it's so obvious at this point that multitasking and all of that kind of stuff is very outdated thinking, but I see it happening. It's still very much part of the culture of a lot of organizations where, people have 15,000 tabs open in their browser and there's just all this stuff going on, and people are just not realistic with what you can actually accomplish, right, in a day. And I think there's a lot of work to be done there around, first, again, if we set it up from the core, I would say the core foundational questions of, like, how do I really want to feel each day and how do I want to show up each day? Like, what if my intention is to feel good most days, then what needs to happen for that, to be realized? And that's probably not checking off 20 things off your to-do list, because it's just not possible. But setting that intention first and then taking a look at your job and what you're doing every day, being realistic. And then I would think we're in a really fun era of, obviously, tools that are just escalating to help us with our job. So that's the next big step around, okay, out of all of this, is there something that can help me be more productive so that I can free up more time to actually think and make decisions? Because that's the new superpower. It's I say new, but I mean, it's always been a superpower. But I think that's the superpower that is going to become more and more prevalent especially in AI world, right? Where we have a lot of options to do a lot of different tasks and so forth that we can have a companion there essentially. But the real superpower is, am I asking the right questions to that agent? And am I asking the right questions in terms of the direction of what I should be doing or what the business should be doing and so forth? Like that's where it becomes really, really interesting.
Yeah, okay. I think everything does come down to that, because when you ask the right questions, when we throw in the world of productivity, everything comes down to just prioritization. Because what is your highest priority? Let's just focus on that and let everything else just
Yeah.
dissolve away.
Well, and the other
Right?
thing too, and I'm guilty of this as well. So I have to remind myself of this hack, but we can have the best of intentions, and let's say in the morning, and we or even on a, like today, we're recording this on a Friday. So right after this, actually, it's always in my calendar. I will review this week and see what went well, what didn't, and what kind of modifications I would make so that I can take a look at next week and adjust essentially.
Okay.
And also look at next week as based on the meetings that are booked, I'll put tasks for those days. And is that realistic? Like, am I setting myself up for failure on Wednesday when, it's Friday right now, and I can pre-plan and make sure that I don't get to that point where it's going to feel like that's not even attainable. So there's the proactivity piece. But the point that I wanted to make is that when I actually get to Wednesday, something may happen. There might be an emergency. Something might I might have to take a call or a meeting that wasn't scheduled. And what often happens is we don't readjust our list. And then we get to the end of the day and we feel defeated because we haven't checked everything off. But that's not fair. The circumstances changed. So my invitation to everyone, and this is a reminder for myself too, I get caught up on this as well, but I feel the best when situation happens. I take a couple minutes, maybe not even a couple minutes. Sometimes it's seconds. And I take a look. I'm like, okay, realistically, I'm going to have to move this to tomorrow or later in the week because something hijacked my time and I can only do this one thing now. Or maybe I have to cancel a meeting or postpone something. But that reevaluation piece makes all the difference because now you have the opportunity to finish the day like, yeah, I made progress today. And I'm not feeling deflated from the fact that I didn't check everything off.
Hey, quick break. If you're enjoying these conversations, you're going to want to check out my Substack newsletter. I plan on sharing bite-sized insights on productivity, slowing down, and really enjoying the work that you do. No fluff, just real talk, different actionable tips that I learned, books that I read, other podcasts that I listen to, or newsletters that I read. Basically, anything that pops in my head that doesn't necessarily make it to the show. So if you're interested, use the link in my show notes and sign up for my newsletter. Let's keep these conversations going. All right? Okay, back to the episode. Did this kind of awareness come with a lot of practice? Because I feel like, yes, it's obvious when you say this, and I understand that. But I feel like it takes time to first bash yourself every day for days on end, and then you realize, okay, you know what? I need to get used to this. I think this is okay. I don't have to check off everything on my list. Where does that awareness come from?
Well, it comes from the daily check-ins, because let's just continue playing that scenario. So let's say Wednesday is hijacked. I don't adjust my to-do list. But then Thursday morning, first thing I'm doing is I'm checking in with myself and I feel stressed and anxious and behind. Why? Well, because yesterday my day was hijacked and I didn't adjust. So just after that happens, a number of times, and you're like, well, okay, we're capturing data for ourselves. Like, I don't feel great. And I it was a really stressful week because of these things. Let's not repeat that next week. So it's those micro changes. And that's like, if I can stress anything, it's just this, like that. I'm not suggesting huge shifts in your schedule. It might just be one thing on your to-do list that you move around based on something happening that makes all the difference. And then if you have a consistent kind of self-awareness check-in practice, that again is while your coffee's brewing or whatever it is, then you're working with relevant data for you. And over time, that stuff stacks, right? It's exponential in a good way.
That's fair, because what's the point of collecting this data if you're not going to adjust day by day?
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like this idea because everything comes back to that question, that check-in, that energy level, that energy check-in, that how am I feeling right now? Why or why not?
Exactly. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that.
That's fair. Okay, I'm going to give that a shot. Okay.
Yeah.
You have a podcast, you have one book out, you're working on the next book. I know you have a mental fitness program that you are currently running as well.
Yes.
How do you personally balance ambition and presence as well, just being in the moment and not overly killing yourself to achieve the next big thing? Do you struggle with that?
Less and less, just because I do my best to basically practice what I preach. I mean, as an example, as we're recording this right now, starting as of yesterday, for the next 8 weeks, it's pretty intense with, I think it's 8 weeks, 6 clients, 7 cities or something like that for mental fitness activations. So there's travel there. There's, it's not, there's multiple activations in one day as an example. So there's a lot going on, but that's a season, right? And then basically the summer will come and that'll slow down a little bit, and I'll be able to turn up the media related projects like the podcast and the books and stuff like that. So just being honest with myself around this is normal. This is right now. My focus has to be on a mental fitness plan for me that keeps me present and energized, because everyone, including yourself right now, has to get 100% of me in these interactions. So in order to do that, I need to be mentally fit and physically fit. So, and this is what I run teams through in companies. I really just guide people into creating what's your one-page protocol for your mind, including your practices, which we've already talked about, and including your mental nutrition, right? Podcasts, music, like what's the stuff that's going to activate and energize your mind versus deplete your mind, right? And just being very conscious about that, and just executing on the protocol or the plan. And this is just coming from my past corporate experience where, we put together brand and product strategies that were multiple slides deep and so forth, but we always had, they used to call them POAs, plan of action. And it was always on a page, so that whether it's sales reps or management or brand managers, didn't matter what title you had, you just had to look at the one page and be like, oh, this is why I'm doing this. This is the messaging. This is the plan for the quarter, whatever it is. So, and I have one here. I mean, this is the mental fitness plan. I mean, it's your plan on a page, right? To show up as the person you want to be, presenting, I guess you can say, for yourself and others, and the emotions that you want to be feeling, and just checking in with that. So, so that's how I do it. I mean, of course, it's a lot. Like last week there was a couple days where I just felt like, how am I going to do this? Is, each client, there's different circumstances, and I've got to adjust things. And I'm not just delivering the same program over and over again. There's tailored customization to it. So I had to look at my schedule again and be like, okay, I can't do everything. So as much as I'm so motivated and energized by the research for the new book, I had to slow that down a little bit, and I'll do more of that once I'm done this travel sprint.
Okay. So it comes down to seasons of where you are right now, focus all of your energy on it, and then move on to the next thing.
It's just like Olympic athletes, right? I've had the pleasure of interviewing quite a few of them at this point, and they train for an event, right? So all of their training and how they're existing in the world is for that event. Then the event happens and they reset. Okay, well, maybe now it's recovery, or now it's the next event, and I'm going to adjust for that thing. We can do the same thing within the corporate world.
I see. Okay. I Can we get into this if you don't mind? Can
Yeah.
you explain how did you get into the this mentally fit seminars, the workshops with clients that you get into? How I know you talked about how you got into the app or how the book came out to be, your entire journey with journaling. But where did this program come in? And how does
Well,
that really work? Because what I saw out of your journey so far is the keynote speakings and the public speaking. That's the aspect that I want to get into, but I just want to know, how did you even get into that zone?
yeah. Well, I mean, it just started with, I mean, I wrote the book. I was hundreds of interviews in at this point with Behind the Human, studying this kind of work and so forth, and got to this kind of point where I have this knowledge that I know works, and it's not just from me using it, even though I had to, especially in those dark moments. But there are people around the world, like the best thinkers and so forth, that have these practices. And I have a bit of a unique situation where I've worked in that corporate environment and understand the reality. So I just started reaching out to basically my, past colleagues, saying, "Hey, this
Okay.
is what I'm doing right now. I know exactly what you're up against because I've done your job. Um, would you be open to having me come in and integrate mental fitness into the operations? Or if you're having a kickoff product launch or an offsite or something like that, we can integrate it in." And started there and just started expanding from there. And I still do that. It's still there's a lot of business development on this topic because it's still not a topic that I would say everyone defaults to, right? Like there's a lot of people that are out there that, leadership skills or whatever, the high performance sales, like everyone talks
Hmm.
about that, which again, I'm biased, of course, but my argument is you can bring all of that stuff in, but if your mind is in a survival state, you can't execute on those sales models and whatever it is at the capacity that you're hoping for. So it's
Hmm.
just constantly, staying in touch with the network and then sharing. I find right now on my side, I'm doing, anytime I do any kind of engagement with a team, I just share what we talked about, or yesterday's was a chamber of commerce for York region, just outside of Toronto.
Hmm.
And I'm just sharing photos from that experience so people can see, like, oh, what's that all about, and why would they bring in someone to speak about mental fitness, just to
Yeah.
help paint the picture of use cases, and then that starts to
Yeah.
snowball and so forth.
See, that's exactly why I wanted to know this, because I am an engineer. So I work for nuclear power plants.
Yeah.
The entire engineering industry would talk about sales and leadership and how do you optimize everything else that we work with. It's all about engineering, but how does one even introduce the aspect of mental fitness? Or in my case, if I want to talk about productivity and toxic productivity and how do you really prioritize work, how would I approach a nuclear engineering company with this program? That is it okay if I can come and talk about this? That's why I wanted to know. Okay, yeah, then
Yeah.
if you have started your journey in that way, then I guess that's how everybody is supposed to start. Because in my mind, I was thinking that my companies or the companies that I worked in the past, they might not be interested in this. So maybe I should start at school level or university level or just nearby community centers where people get together. That's what I was really aiming for. But if I want to get into corporate clients, then I have to get into that world.
No, I think you go to the world you know best. And honestly, on my side, at the beginning, it was challenging because I'm speaking about practices and principles and so forth that obviously affect the mind. And for the longest time, not the longest time, at the very beginning, I had a lot of self doubt because I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and I'm not trying to play one on the internet. But it
Imposter
was,
syndrome.
yeah, exactly. But what started to happen fairly quickly, actually, and I'm happy it played out like this, is in the breaks after I deliver some sort of keynote or a workshop, people would come up and their comments would be something around the relatability to their job. And it's the
Okay.
first time they heard this kind of work in relation, not a psychologist talking about, concepts or principles and models and things like that. Not that there's anything wrong with any of that, but because I've been in their role, and this is this is for you too, I would approach like, you are the engineer working in that environment. Here's what I'm learning from this topic that would apply to the entire plant, essentially, or at least the engineering department, right? And then it's the relevance, like that's, and then you start to expand from there afterwards. But
Of course.
I'd say like the vast majority of the business, especially in the early days, all came from the healthcare space, which is where I was working directly, and now it's expanding more, and I'm working with speaking bureaus and so forth. But before that, it takes time to build that up.
Yeah, it's just that's what I was thinking about. You're giving me hope here that I want to get my reps in before I even jump into TEDx stages or speaking bureaus or keynote speaking. But first, I
Yeah.
need to lay the ground and build a brand around it. And then probably things might just come my way even without me trying to attempt for it.
But just, I wouldn't even try to expand it. I mean, because productivity is such a huge topic, I'd use that as your topic, but niche it in your industry. Be like, I'm the productive engineer. That's a terrible tagline, but you know what I mean.
I know. I see. Okay. Yeah. You have given me hope here. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we wrap this up, I have one question. In your years of experience professionally and personally, you must have learned and unlearned so many things, ways of optimizing life, ways to be aware of what truly matters in life. And I'm sure different phases of life that must have evolved too. So can you name one belief that you used to believe in before and you have removed that from your life right now? You have changed your mind on it recently?
Yeah, well, I still have to be reminded of this every now and then, but what comes to mind is there are no shortcuts in pick whatever your topic is. Like, if I'm trying to grow the podcast, it'll just be, let's do a collaboration with this other big show or something like that, which may, give a little bit of a bump or something like that. But it's, in reality, it's the consistency, it's the weekly episodes, it's constantly doing something that you're energized about, that lights you up and so forth. Like, because it's easy, especially in today's world, you see, we live through kind of the highlight reels of people, and it seems like they're shortcutting, pick your topic, shortcutting audience growth, shortcutting the amount of keynotes they're doing. Like, this happened recently. There's someone I know really well. He was an advisor actually to our app. Ben Nimpton is his name. And I think he's been rated, he's either number 1 or number 2 as a global international speaker, right behind Tony Robbins.
Wow. Okay.
And, if you look at if you just start to kind of stumble upon him now, he's speaking all around the world nonstop all the time. And he's killing it. But I knew him 7+ years ago when he was just starting to do that. And, it's been 7 years to get to that point of look at this guy, like he's booked all the time kind of thing. Right. So it's things like that I think we have to remind ourselves around. There's a lot of work that's happening behind the scenes. And as cliche as it sounds, that's the journey, right? Like, if you can take great satisfaction and take joy from the actual journey of it, then the whole process is that much more enjoyable.
I like that. No shortcuts. It's a harsh reality, but it's something that everybody needs to be reminded of.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Marc,
thank you.
The mental fitness strategist, the host of Behind the Human podcast, the author of Personal Socrates, and a sought-out speaker about after clarity, intentional living, and sustainable performance. Thank you very much for giving me time, and I really appreciate this conversation that you allowed me to be part of. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, fantastic questions. Great. For me, I think there's a lot of really practical use cases. So thanks for your hosting abilities. It's not easy. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Marc.